Exterminate! 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 You are the Doctor! You are the enemy of the Daleks! You will be exterminated! Exterminate! Exterminate! Doctor! Exterminate! Exterminate! Location Earth! Life forms detected! Exterminate! 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 Exterminate!
That's right. What happened?
They killed all the Daleks.
Who do you think?
Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail, and welcome to the next video in a new ranking series for Doctor Who, where I'm going to be ranking every episode from a particular antagonist stroke villain era. So I've done two previous videos on this series so far. The first is where I ranked every single story to feature the Master as the core antagonist. And then in the last video in the series, I did a video where I ranked every single story to feature the Cybermen as the core antagonist of the story. And in today's video, I thought I would finish off the big three, if you like. And the only one I haven't talked about as part of the big three is obviously, as you've seen by the thumbnail, seen by the opening clips, you know I'm talking about the Daleks. So quickly, before we jump straight into this ranking, I do have to set a bit of a precedent in terms of what I count as a Dalek story, like I did with the Cybermen and the Master. So they have to be the core villain of the particular episode, or they have to feature quite heavily in the story. So I'm not counting stories where they just cameo. So stuff like the Five Doctors won't be on this list. The Wedding of River Song, where there's a destroyed Dalek, that won't be on this list either. I'm only counting stories whereby they play a massive role into that particular story, or they are the only core antagonist of said story. There will also be a couple of stories that will overlap from previous lists, such as like Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, and The Power of the Doctor, etc. But now we've got all that out the way, I also should mention that this is only my personal opinion. So if you disagree with any of my choices, that is perfectly fine, but can we just remember to be respectful? This is just my personal thoughts. But without any further ado, let's waste no more time and jump straight into this ranking of every single Dalek story. Alright, so here is the brand new tier list ranking every single Dalek story from the Daleks in 1963 all the way up to the Power of the Doctor for Jodie Whittaker's finale in 2022, because we've not had a Dalek story in RTD2. Ncuti hasn't faced a Dalek. Technically 14 faced a Dalek in that Comic Relief Children Need special, but I'm not counting that here. But as you can see, we've got all of them. So a couple of quick rules extra as well. Any two-parters from like the new series, I've just condensed into one. So I'll be combining them as one whole. So like Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks, I'm talking about as a whole. But also in terms of how I'm ranking them, I'm not ranking them necessarily based on the story. I kind of am. But mostly how the Daleks are used in said story as well. That is crucial for this as well. Because if they're used quite poorly in their story, it's going to go into bad, unfortunately. But yeah, I am ranking it based on story and how the Daleks are used. So we've got 5 categories like we did for the Cybermen. We have the best, so these are obviously the greatest Dalek stories. We've got great, so great Dalek stories. Good Dalek stories, but there could be some improvements made. Meh, this is the okay category. So it was done okay, but perhaps the Daleks weren't used the best, or pacing was off, something didn't feel quite right. And then we've got bad, so, you know, the story was rubbish, the Daleks were misused, that sort of thing. Without any further ado though, let's jump straight into this. And also, yeah, the Daleks in colour is not included here. I'm only talking about the original version of the Daleks. So we have got the Daleks from 1963. For me, this is a good Dalek story. I can't necessarily say it's great or the best. It is a good, solid Dalek story to start with, introduces them in a great way, but it's because the Daleks have changed so much over time. I like how they're able to take command, how they're able to have this scary presence, but also trick them into thinking that they might be a bit peaceful, you know, allowing like Susan to go out and get medicine and stuff that they need to help like the Doctor and co who are struggling, you know, but they've got that sinister evil side. You can't really trust them. You know, it is done pretty well. The story itself is not too bad, but it is very slow-paced, you know, towards the end of the story. As a 7-parter, it does drag a bit. I don't mind it as a Dalek story. I love it when Ian pretends to be a Dalek, and you've got the great Dalek chase through Skaro. I think that is really cool. But it's a pretty decent start for the Daleks, but just nothing spectacular. It's good, but not great for me. The Dalek invasion of Earth for me, however, is then a step above the Daleks. I think it is a great Dalek story. Firstly, it's a little bit shorter, but also the Daleks get a slight redesign, adapting themselves to Earth because they've invaded Earth, 2150 AD. It's the departure story for Susan, you know, getting to see them travelling through London, the flying saucers, them using, like, I think they call them the Robo-Men, you know, captured humans that they've, like, changed into their slaves to do their bidding. You know, you get to see the more manipulative evil side of the Daleks and what they're more capable of. I quite like it. And like I said, it's a more fast-paced story with a lot more, you know, at stake in this story as well, because they've already invaded Earth, conquered the Earth, you know, whereas in the Daleks, they are sort of trapped within their little metal city. So they become more of a threat in this story, and I quite like it. Then we move on to The Chase, which is another finale for a companion. It's the end of Barbara and Ian, so the original TARDIS trio is then gone from this story. For me, The Chase, I also think is good. In terms of, it's fun. But what I will say is I find it quite weird how the Daleks, you know, they have a time machine that they are able to chase the Doctor and co all through time using, but yet you never really see them properly use that again properly later on down the line, because that's quite OP. I will say, though, that it at times does teeter into maybe meh, because of the fact that the Daleks do get overpowered by ridiculous things in this story. You see them fall off cruise ships, pirate ships. You see them getting defeated by, like, Dracula and Frankenstein and stuff like that. It goes a bit crazy, but the Mechanoid Dalek war towards the end I think is really interesting. Yeah, I quite like it. I'd say it's good. It's, again, nothing great. I don't think it's bad enough to go into meh, but it could slightly teeter there. But I quite like The Chase. And as a story, 6 parts, bit of fun, departure for Ian and Barbara, and sends them off in a great way, if I'm being perfectly honest. The Daleks Master Plan I have included because I have listened to the vinyl, I've seen the surviving episodes, 3 episodes survive, I've seen bits and pieces of clips. I'm going to judge this based on just what I've seen and what I've heard. Obviously this will probably go higher, depending on if it gets found eventually, which I'm hoping it will, fingers crossed, it really needs to. For now, I'm going to put the Daleks Master Plan in good. But it definitely, I think, has the potential to be great or the best, because what I've listened to and what I've seen is definitely good. And teeters on great, but I think I can't put it any further higher on the list because of the fact that the vast majority of it is missing. You can tell the Daleks are sinister, you know, joining up, having an alliance with lots of different people in order to conquer the universe. The fact that this story ends multiple companions, you got the return of the meddling monk. The Daleks are evil and sinister in this story, and it's really, really good. I just really want to see the story in its entirety in order for it to maybe get bumped up to great or the best. Then we got Power of the Daleks, which obviously in the last like 10 years, we got a slight taste of that through the Matt Smith story Victory of the Daleks. And I think the Power of the Daleks is a great Dalek story because of how the Daleks really take their time. You know, they really try to make you feel like they are on your side. They trick people. They pretend to be your servants, you know, in order to gain your trust before they then conquer. You know, at the start of the story, there's only like 1 or 2 Daleks, but then more start to appear, and then eventually they're building their own army, doing it themselves in order to take over. You know, it's a post-regeneration story, so you've got a Doctor who's not exactly at the height of his intelligence and at the height of his power and abilities. So, and yet he's got to try and take on his arch nemesis. I think it's done really, really well. And the pacing and the fear that the Daleks put into the characters in this story is really, really good. And it really brings the best out of the Doctor. Really brings the Doctor out of the Doctor, who at that time doesn't think he's the Doctor. So I love Power of the Daleks. I think both the Patrick Troughton Dalek stories are really solid. As you're going to see by the fact that I'm putting Evil of the Daleks up here as one of the best. The only criticism I have of Evil of the Daleks is it is too long. 7 parts is way too long for this story. It does drag, especially at the start. But again, the slow build-up of the story. I love the Emperor Dalek on Skaro. I love all that, the booming voice. I love the human Dalek factor. The Doctor able to like make some Daleks good per se. They are fun. You get lots of different variations of Daleks in this story, and I think it is done really, really well. You got the Daleks holding new companion Victoria hostage, tormenting her. You know, there's a lot that goes on in this story, and I think also visually through the animation, it looks brilliant, and the Daleks are used fantastically in this story, if I'm perfectly honest. So for me, anyway, Evil of Daleks is probably my favourite Dalek story of the 60s, then probably the Dalek Invasion of Earth then comes close second, I'd say. Day of the Daleks. The Jon Pertwee era Dalek stories are weird. And also it depends on what version you want to talk about in terms of Day of the Daleks. Like, for me, Day of the Daleks, I think is good if you're focusing more on the special edition variant. You know, where they've changed up the Dalek voices because obviously they thought the Daleks were going to be gone after Evil, and so the modulations and all were messed up and lost, and so the Daleks sound really weird in the original version, which is jarring. There's also only like 3 of them in the original variant, so there's not really a massive threat, and they don't do an awful lot. But then in the special edition with new scenes, more Daleks, the Nicholas Briggs modulation onto them, which does take some getting used to because you're watching a classic story with the new Dalek voice, but it makes them more menacing and it brings them out of their shells a little bit more. The story itself isn't too bad. I can't quite put it in meh, but for me, it can't go any higher than good. So that's just my personal opinion. I like the Ogrons and the Daleks using the Ogrons as like slaves alongside humans and stuff like that. I think that's great. Again, they teeter into time travel again, but not using time machines. They do it in a bit of a different way. But yeah, it's an okay story, but I'm not too sure. Planet of the Daleks for me is a lot better. I love Planet of the Daleks. I think it is a fairly solid Jon Pertwee Dalek story. I love the planet Spiridon, or Spyridon, I think. Daleks trying to use invisibility. I think that is sinister, that is scary and a terrifying thought. The fact that they practically were almost able to do it is scary. It parallels the Daleks as well. It's almost like a sequel to the Daleks, because you've got people who've come over from Skaro who know the tales of the Dr. Ian and Barbara and stuff from the original story, which I think is quite nice, so good for continuity there. I love the Supreme Dalek, the gold and the black. I think it's used really, really well. Like I said, Daleks going invisible and experimenting, finding new ways to conquer the universe, I think is really, really good, using their high intelligence. The pacing is pretty good. I think it's quite good, and it follows on from Frontier in Space, the previous story, where the Daleks do cameo at the end. I didn't include Frontier in Space because it's mostly not a Dalek story, but Planet of the Daleks is really good and has some great speeches from the Doctor as well, especially when it comes to bravery as well. I love that. Death to the Daleks, however, is the first story for me that's going down here. It's going into the meh category. It is my least favourite of the Jon Pertwee Dalek stories. I'm not overly keen on them. I don't mind their design. The silvery colour I think looks really, really nice. Their voices are okay. They're not terrific, but you can get used to them. But there's some really weird Daleks in this story, and they're not used the best. They got a great concept to work with, that the Daleks are unable to use their weapons and so have to form an alliance with their worst enemy and the people around them, but they don't do it for long enough. And also the Daleks are made to be a mockery in multiple times in this story, through a Dalek that loses a prisoner and just decides to then just end it for some apparent reason, Daleks falling into lakes, getting pushed over, hit with sticks, getting defeated by the floor. It's just ridiculous, if I'm honest. So, for me anyway, it is the weakest of the Jon Pertwee Dalek stories. Genesis of the Daleks, I mean, need I say more? Genesis of the Daleks is obviously going up in the best. It is one of the best, not only Dalek stories, but it is almost one of the best Doctor Who stories. You know, you go back to how the Daleks were first made, through the Khaleds and the Thals. You introduce a Davros, who appears in all the rest of the Dalek stories for Classic Who. You get to see how they were made, how they were turned from, you know, from this race into a new race of mutants who are, you know, powered in tanks. And, you know, even Davros himself doesn't understand how they have no mercy, and in the end they end up killing him themselves. It's really good. The Daleks aren't in it an awful lot, but when they are in it, they are menacing, terrifying, and I love them to pieces. And just the story in general is fantastic. For Sarah and Harry, one of the best, if not the best TARDIS team in Doctor Who history, in my personal opinion. Fantastic. And Michael Wisher as Davros is terrific. Unfortunately, then you got Destiny. For me, Destiny is bad. Unfortunately, it is the complete opposite. I know I might be being a bit harsh, but if I'm honest, out of all the Dalek stories in Classic Who, Destiny is probably my least favourite Dalek story. I'm not a huge fan of Destiny. I think they get the Daleks confused. They think of them as just pure robots, which the Daleks aren't robots. They have those creatures inside of them, and that's wrong. Even Davros calls them out on it in a line. He says something like, another race of robots. I'm like, Davros, you've made the Daleks. You know they're not fully robots, right? You know there's an organic creature inside of them, right? And the Dalek is just like a casing and like a tank. I don't get that. And also the Daleks just deciding to blow themselves up, I think is just weird. Obviously, the production-wise side of things, the story doesn't look great. And the Daleks are mocked again. I'm just not a huge fan of Destiny, unfortunately. Davros also isn't as good in this one. You know, David Gunnarsson does a fairly good job as Davros, taking over from Michael Wisher, but unfortunately doesn't fully sell it for me. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Destiny, and I know a lot of people. There's some people who do like Destiny, and if you do, great. And to be fair, I can see what you can like about it. It is a funny story, but it's just not for me. Resurrection of the Daleks is going up here in one of the best. Again, I love the slightly darker Dalek stories, and Resurrection has that tenfold. One of the darkest stories in Doctor Who. You know, it causes Tegan to leave, has a massive death count. There's so many kills that the Daleks get off. You know, Davros returning. They're trying to use this deadly virus. You know, Davros, there's different factions of Daleks that are starting to come out now. This is where they start to separate, like, Davros's Daleks from, like, a Supreme Daleks. They try to do a bit of a split from here on out, you know, where the Daleks almost don't see Davros as a Dalek, and they just use him. That starts to happen from this story onwards. I really like it. I like the Daleks teaming up with different people. You know, I think it's just a really good Dalek story, and I like the Dalek voices as well. You know, it's a good story, and I definitely highly recommend it. And it comes from a fantastic series of Doctor Who as well. Season 21, can we get that on the collection range, please? Because it has Kayser Androzani as well. Revelation of the Daleks. Unlike some people who I know probably think this one shouldn't go higher than good, but could be meh, I quite like Revelation of the Daleks. Colin Baker's Dalek story, I think is quite good. Again, I like the dark nature of the story. Davros pretending to be this great healer who is, you know, on this like funeral planet, who is luring the Doctor in to trap him, but is actually like converting the people of the planet either into a new race of Daleks or turning them into food and then feeding it back to the people. You know, like cannibalism, more or less. It is really disturbing, the imagery you get. The catacombs where the Daleks are hiding out in are eerie. I love it. I love the design of the glass Dalek, which turns out to be someone's father. who the person does reunite with the father, seeing them as the Dalek, and goes insane. Also, this story does feature the first time a Dalek does technically levitate to a degree. The Doctor doesn't see it. That comes in Remembrance of the Daleks with the famous stairs scene. But a Dalek does sort of hover off the ground. And even Davros, there's a scene where Davros actually hovers slightly off the ground. People always forget that. But yeah, I quite like this story. And it's highly underrated. Remembrance of the Daleks, you know, like Genesis, let's be real. Remembrance of the Daleks is a cult classic, a fantastic Dalek story. You got the proper Dalek factions here. They were introduced to the white and gold Daleks, the Necros Daleks, I think they call them in the Revelation story. But yeah, you've got the Imperial versus the Renegade faction. You've got the Special Weapons Dalek in this. Davros becoming the Emperor of the Imperial Daleks. All taking place on Earth, outside Coal Hill School. It's, you know, during the anniversary season, the 25th anniversary, which a lot of people think this should have been the anniversary story, not Silver Nemesis, and I kind of agree. But yeah, it is a fantastic story, really well paced. You see the Doctor see a Dalek floating for the first time, the famous stairs scene where the Doctor thinks, right, we can get away from this Dalek ace by running up the stairs. Go, quick, the stairs! And he trips. You know, there's a guy waiting at the top of the stairs who locks the Doctor in, knocks Ace out. He can't get out. And the Dalek slowly climbs the stairs, getting ready to exterminate him. It's a great cliffhanger. Fantastic story. Highly recommend Remembrance of the Daleks. Moving swiftly into the modern era, you know my thoughts on Dalek with Christopher Eccleston. It too is also one of the best Dalek stories and one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. It is probably my favourite episode from Christopher Eccleston's era. You know, you've got the Time War that has come and gone. The Doctor is still obviously a bit traumatised from it, and he thinks he's won, but then encounters the lone survivor of the evil race that he was fighting against, which caused him to lose all of his people, and he just goes spare. He's filled with anger, he's filled with hatred, he's filled with upset and outrage, and you see it in the first scene when he's trapped in the little bunker base where the Dalek's being kept, the cage I think they call it. And the Dalek just goes ham and goes on a rampage, just killing everything in sight. And it is just intense. You know, you feel like, I get goosebumps whenever I watch it. And you see the Dalek going through the corridors. Some of the speeches between the Dalek and the Doctor is some of the best in modern Who. Even in all of Doctor Who. I just love it and it's fantastic. Ninth Doctor catchphrase there. Similarly, with, you know, Bad Wolf and Parting the Ways, I think both the Dalek stories for season 1 are like up there as some of the best Who to watch, because Bad Wolf and Parting the Ways, the both parts, done really well. The Daleks have conquered Earth again, technically, using Satellite 5, which was set up earlier in the series, in order to take control of humanity using the TV, controlling the game station, as they call it, you know? And I think it's done really, really well. The Daleks have managed to rebuild themselves, hide out. You know, the Emperor Dalek is back again, who's really menacing. The Daleks taking over the space station and killing everyone in sight. Again, you know, the Daleks are at their most menacing in season 1, and that is clear from the get-go in this story. I love Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways. It's really good. Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Now, if you've watched my Cyberman version of this, I put this story in meh because the Cybermen were treated like garbage. However, I'm going to put Army of Ghosts and Doomsday into great this time round in this list because the exact opposite happens to the Daleks. The Daleks aren't in the first part, they're the cliffhanger to Army of Ghosts, but then in Doomsday they wreak havoc, destroying not only humans, but tearing the Cybermen apart. You know, just shooting them down like they are nothing. And some of the lines that the Daleks use, like I said in the last video, Dalek Sec owning the Cyber leader, saying you are better at dying, is just hilarious to see. I adore it. They are great, and it is a great Dalek story overall. Let's just move that just up there. There we are. It is just a great Dalek story. I can't deny it. Then we've got Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks. I'm of two minds about this story. If I'm honest, I'm just going to put it in meh. I know some people might go a bit, why? It should at least be in good, and I can see why. And if you want to put it in good, albeit, and I can see reasons for putting it in good, it's definitely worth at least maybe going good. But for me, it's just nothing special. The Daleks feel a bit lackluster. You got the pig slaves, which are a nice little addition. They remind me of like the Ogron, when they used the Ogrons and the Robo-Men and stuff like that. So that's quite a nice little touch, I suppose. I like the New York setting. The cast of characters are good. Dalek Sec Hybrid was a nice idea, but it sort of ruined the Cult of Skaro a little bit, if I'm honest. Yeah, and the human Daleks, they were just a bit boring. They were just humans with the Dalek laser guns. And yeah, I wasn't huge on it, if I'm honest. It was just a bit... It's okay, which is why it's in Meh, but it's nothing spectacular. Stolen Earth and Journey's End is going up here. It is, again, one of the best Dalek stories of all time. If you've seen rankings where I've ranked Modern Who, you know my thoughts on Stolen Earth and Journey's End. I think it is really good. The Daleks, moving planets, controlling planets, taking them from their point in space and time, moving them, shifting them, planning on just destroying the universe. A new fleet of Daleks, they take over the Earth, they were, Davros is back. It's like unbelievable, this story. They managed to finally kill the Doctor, where a Dalek actually kills the Doctor and he has to regenerate. Something that the Daleks have never been able to do up to this point, and I think that is fantastic in terms of the show, because the Doctor always mocks the Daleks for that. It is fantastic and is brilliant. Davros using his own body parts and his own DNA and structure and all that and flesh in order to rebuild the Daleks. They're more insane. Dalek Khan is back. There's a lot that goes on in this story, and they kill on a grand scale. It is unbelievable. Fantastic story, hands down. Victory of the Daleks. For me, I think it's quite good, because at the time it was trying to be Power of the Daleks, and I like that, and I love the Ironside design, that they're helping, Winston Churchill to win the war. Winston doesn't fully believe that the Daleks are evil. He thinks they've been built by this professor that he's got, but the Doctor obviously knows he has history of the Daleks. I think the Paradigm Daleks, the different colours, the white one, the blue one, red, orange, that sort of thing. I think they were fantastic, and they were really menacing. The deeper voices, the bigger build, they gave them a bigger threat. It's just a shame they never really carried on using them. The fact they had a backup plan as well, so when their initial plan failed, they decided to use Bracewell, the little robot guy that they put down on Earth, as a bomb to try and blow it all up. Shows that the Daleks just don't care, and I love it. And they technically do win. They get away. The whole point is they were rebuilding themselves, and the Doctor can't stop them from rebuilding, and so they do win. And I think that's really good. For me, yeah, this one's going in bad as well. It's Pandorica opens and the Big Bang, but in particular, the Big Bang. Because the Daleks cameo in Pandorica opens, but then there's only one stone Dalek for all of the Big Bang. Don't like this story. Not a huge fan of Big Bang at all. Too convoluted, too confusing. And especially when, in the previous episode, we were promised the idea of this big alliance of all these villains coming together, and then all we get then is one stone Dalek that is constantly revitalizing itself, is a bit lackluster and boring and dull, and I'm not a huge fan of it at all. And yeah, it's boring. I can't stand it. The Dalek's not used very well in this story either. So for me, it's a bad Dalek story. Then we've got Asylum of the Daleks, which, again, for me, do I put it in bad or do I put it in meh? I'm actually going to put it in bad. I know, and I feel there could be a twinge of people saying, what? Because, yeah, it is. Because the Daleks get shafted in this story for the Amy and Rory divorce storyline. And I'm like, oh my God, what on earth are we doing here? Why? Just why, Moffat? Why did we even bother with this? If you're going to have a storyline where Amy and Rory are going to get divorced, don't introduce it in a story like this. And if you are, don't then have them make up by the end of the story. It's like, what was the point? It took all the focus off the Daleks, and we were promised loads of Daleks as well from all the different eras of the show, which we technically got, but they were like background dressing. It was like, oh, there's the special weapons Dalek over there. Oh wait, one of the Emperor's guards from Evil's in the background over there for like a second, and they even go through a list in the intensive care treatment area that Oswin Oswald, Clara, talks about and lists places like Exelon and Spyrodon from previous stories, but they show us the normal modern day Bronze Daleks. Why didn't you use the actual casings from those stories? Because it just takes away that fact, and I'm like, no, that's not that Dalek. It's like, it messed it all up. I'm not a fan of Asylum of the Daleks, in my opinion. If you like it, again, fair enough, and I guess there's parts that I like, but I just struggle to connect with it. I included Time of the Doctor because I was unsure about this one. I included Time of the Doctor simply because of the fact that the Daleks are in it a decent bit. I could have included Day of the Doctor as well because of the Time War, but for me, I felt like Day of the Doctor was more of a Zygon story. Because once the War Doctor comes out of the Time War area, you don't really see the Daleks again. So I didn't want to include Day. But I included Time because they are in it a lot, and they do invade the purple mainframe, and you get the human Dalek in, things with the eye stalk comes out the forehead and all again. So I decided to include that. In terms of the Daleks, I think it's just meh. As a story, I think Time of the Doctor is probably good to great. But in terms of the Daleks, I think it's kind of meh. They're done okay. They pop up here and there, doing little bits and pieces, but they never really feel truly menacing, if I'm honest. Into the Dalek, I think, is good. I think it's a good story. Nothing great. I like the concept of the Doctor being shrunk down and put inside his worst enemy. I think, why hasn't that been done before? And they do it in a good way here. I think the inside of the Dalek could have looked a lot more interesting. It just looked very generic and basic. Bland metallic corridors and little acid pools. There wasn't really an awful lot to see in there, so it felt kind of boring at times, but I like the concept of a good Dalek and the Dalek that then goes on the rampage and kills the other Daleks. I thought that was quite fun, and it does that because it knows the Doctor hates the Daleks, and so it must eliminate the Daleks. I think it was all done. I like Rusty. Rusty was a cool Dalek to introduce. Yeah, I thought it was a good story. Nothing great, nothing spectacular, but overall, yeah, it was alright. Sorcerer's, the Sorcerer's Apprentice and the Witch's Familiar as a two-parter. I'm a bit hit or miss again on this one. I like some things they do, but I'm not overly keen on other things. I think I could probably teeter it into good. There's parts of me that could put it into meh as well. But I'm not 100% sure. This one does the bringing back lots of Daleks a lot better than Asylum of the Daleks does, and there's some great conversations between the Doctor and Davros in this. And they do reenact the Ian inside a Dalek scene in terms of Skaro, where Clara goes inside of a Dalek, which also mirrors Clara actually being a Dalek in Asylum of the Daleks. But the Master does also take over this story a little bit, Missy. And so that's a bit of unfortunate as well. Yeah, I don't know. There's bits and pieces I like, but which I think pushed it into good, because I like the theming and I like the Doctor and Davros relationship, which is why it's in good. But overall, yeah, it could teeter into meh. It's an okay story, though. Resolution for me. Right. I'm sorry. Resolution's bad. As a story, I would probably say Resolution could go into meh stroke good. But if you're thinking of it as a Dalek story, it is a bad story. Because it is one Dalek, which normally isn't a problem, because there's one Dalek in Dalek with Christopher Eccleston. There's stories where there's one Dalek and it works. It doesn't work here. Because the Dalek firstly spends about 80 to 90% of the story outside of the casing, attached to a person, hidden beneath clothes, or just as tentacles, doesn't really do an awful lot. And then when it is in the casing, which I don't mind the new casing that they used, because it's a different type of Dalek, it just doesn't do an awful lot. And the themes of the episode are just all over the place. Yeah, it was just like, it felt like Chibnall was forced to using a Dalek because of the complaints that people had that there was no returning monsters in Series 11. So it was like, oh, we need to just get this Dalek in there just to hush people up a little bit. That's kind of the idea I get from this. So, not huge on Resolution. Sorry. Revolution of the Daleks, I think this one was a lot better, if I'm being honest. Brought back Captain Jack, but he's not the prime focus here. But I liked, again, the two factions of the Daleks. They did a bit of a remembrance of the Daleks faction here with, the normal bronze Daleks that we get, and then these other Daleks made by the main guy. I can't remember his name, Jack something in this story. It's pretty good. And I like there's a slight different modulation to the voices, the separation between the two. You know, the Daleks invading the I love it when all the Daleks get tricked by the Doctor to go into the TARDIS, and then they're stuck in the TARDIS console room, and they basically get crushed. Bit harsh considering we know that TARDISes are alive, so Doctor a bit mean to the TARDIS there, but it was funny to see all the Daleks in the console room. But yeah, I quite liked Revolution of the Daleks. I thought it was a lot better than Resolution by a mile. But then Eve of the Daleks, I think then Eve is then the best Jodie Whittaker Dalek story. If you're wondering where Flux is, again, the Daleks just pop up briefly in Flux, not counting Flux. Eve of the Daleks, though, is a great story. Definitely my favourite Jodie Dalek story. I quite like it. I love the time loop. I love the execution of Daleks with their multiple guns that they've got. I think that's great. They are scary. They are menacing. You know, the setting of being trapped in that factory does it justice and does it really well. And there's a good bit of comedy in it as well. I don't know, I quite like it. I quite like the silly nature of this one, mixed with the darker tones. It is done really well. It is just a revenge plot that the Daleks have for what happened at the end of Flux. And then to end it, we do have Power of the Doctor again, like from the previous one. Again, I think this one is just meh in terms of how the Daleks are used. They're just doing this other little subplot with volcanoes and causing volcanic eruptions to happen across the planet. They trap the Doctor at one point. But the Master's obviously the core focus of Power of the Doctor. But the Daleks do stuff, I guess. So it is kind of meh. But that is my ranking of every Dalek story. You know, my list is probably going to be vastly different to other people's. And there's people probably looking at this thinking, why is that there? Or, yeah, I agree with that. Or, I'm not sure about that. But that's perfectly fine. As long as we're respectful, I'm happy to hear what your lists would be in the comments below. Where would you put some of these stories? Are some of the ones that I put in the best in your meh or bad category? Or some of the ones that I've put in meh and bad, are they in your great or the best category? I'd be really interested to know, so let me know in the comments below. But that is going to be it for this ranking of every Dalek story. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up. And like I said, put your comments in the comment down below. And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.